Okay, so the topic is digestive wellness, and I really like us to just kind of visualize our digestive system, which, did you all know that it's 16 to 23 feet long? And it's basically, if you've heard some of the folks talking about the microbiome and focusing us on the gut recently, it's really a tube that runs from our mouth to our anus, and it's actually the outside world inside of us. So we're going to be talking about some of those issues of interaction between the outside and inside world. But as we visualize the digestive system and we talk about some of the reasons it doesn't work optimally, I like you to kind of visualize it sort of like a railroad track, and different things happen at different stations. So one thing that I think is important to just conceptualize is that, for example, your mouth, which is you could think of as the first station, is more or less alkaline. And some of the enzymes and the chemical processes that happen in the mouth that start the digestive process happen in an alkaline environment. And then we swallow food and it goes down into kind of the next station, which is the stomach. And the stomach needs to be highly acidic. And we're doing a lot of things in modern life that are reducing the acidity of the stomach. You know, taking drugs, PPIs, and those sorts of things, which really impact digestion at that station, which then has repercussions down the line. We dump food out of the stomach at the rate of about 4 calories per minute. So that kind of tells you when you're having a really energy-dense meal that's high in fat, it takes longer to empty out of the stomach. The first place in the small intestine is kind of acidic, and then it gets neutralized. The pancreas actually drops into that area almost, you could think of it as like baking soda that sort of neutralizes things. And you kind of then end up with a more alkaline environment. So enzymes that have been working to digest your food in your stomach suddenly stop working and other ones turn on. And then you kind of move on into the colon. The major job of the colon is to reabsorb fluids. And that's more or less neutral. But if things sit around in the colon for too long, we keep reabsorbing water. And what can happen is that bile acids that digest fat can build up and make it acidic. It's not supposed to be acidic. And the acidity then kind of hurts the lining of the colon and can actually do some damage. So kind of keep all these things in mind as we move along through these different sections. And a couple of things that I like to keep in mind also have to do with what we call the auxiliary components of the digestive system. So I think we know how important dental health is, especially as we get older and we start losing some jaw. We might end up with loose teeth, but we really need to keep our teeth healthy, and we need to be able to chew our food, because the smaller you make the particle sizes, the more surface area there is for digestive enzymes to work on the food and digest and get the nutrients out of the food. The salivary glands are really important and actually dump some of the digestive enzymes into the mouth that start to work in the mouth, and then actually some of them are turned on further down. And the gallbladder, hugely important. Many people have their gallbladders removed because maybe they have gallstones or something. When they've had their gallbladder removed, they don't any longer have a storage area in their body that stores bile acids. And so if you eat a bunch of fat, like say you really love almonds, or you get one of those trail mixes and you eat a whole lot of it because you're starving, it's going to be really hard on you if you don't have a gallbladder, because you're still going to have bile acids, but you're not going to have a big bunch of them to dump at the same time, okay? So that means you have to be careful of how much fat you eat and, you know, sort of space it through the day. The liver is hugely important. Have a few things to say about that as we move along, and there's a little bit in your handout. Have any of you seen this TED Talk by Julia Enders? It's in your handout, and I want to hugely recommend it. She's a young doctor. I believe she's from Germany. She gives a really great TED Talk on gut health, and she's written a book that you can see the cover of. It's called Gut. And her sister is a cartoonist, and her sister illustrated it. And she illustrated it in such a way that it really helps you to conceptualize what's going on in your gut as things are kind of moving on through. And one of the things that really caught my attention, her sister actually showed these little stick figures in the intestine that were like sweeping it, okay? And that helped us, I think, to understand that one of the reasons we're told to have a period of time when there's nothing in the intestines, you know, have you been hearing the research, and it's been making the news about trying to be 8 to 12 hours without eating, you know, that kind of periodic fast that we're supposed to do during the day? Well, part of that is so that we can actually clean out debris from the intestines, and so that it keeps the intestines more healthy. Anyway, she does this with cartoons, and it's really wonderful and a helpful resource. The other resource that I really highly recommend is called Follow Your Gut, and I understand Rob Knight's going to be talking here sometime soon. So Rob Knight also has a wonderful TED Talk that talks about the microbiome. I'm not going to go into that much today, but I think it's really helpful for us to conceptualize that the microbiome actually has much more DNA than our own body does. There's more of them than there are of us. And he does a very good job of explaining that. The weight of the microbiome is also about 3 pounds, which is about the same weight as our brain. And have you heard this concept called the brain in the gut? Okay. So one of the things that we've come to appreciate is about 90% of the signaling comes from the gut to the brain, and only 10% of it goes the other way. So honestly, when you don't have a healthy tummy or gut, you also are affected from a mood standpoint. Okay, so you know, probably you've already experienced that, or you know people that have experienced that, but it's good to keep that in mind, and it's a really good incentive if you want to be like a happier person to have a happy gut. I think it's also good for us just to appreciate, and I am going to talk slightly about probiotics, but one of the things that we've come to really appreciate is that prebiotics, which is soluble fiber in general, found in plant foods, that's the food that the healthy gut bacteria like to eat. So we don't actually need probiotics as much as we need enough prebiotics or soluble fiber. Both can be helpful, but I find that a lot of people aren't getting enough soluble fiber, so we will be talking about that, and you have a little information in your handout as well. Having a healthy gut microbiome is very important to your immune competence. It's important in the way that you handle drugs, because those little critters actually help you to metabolize drugs. You've all heard about its effect on weight, I'm guessing, because you've heard of fecal transplants. Okay, Steve said yes, so I'm assuming most people here have heard that. You can actually put the microbes from thin people into people that have a serious problem losing weight, and they will begin losing weight and getting back down to normal. And these are all things that I would say it's been less than 10 years, more or less, that we've known all these things. And then for all of us that are getting older, I think we've come to appreciate that the microbiome does affect our rate of aging. And maybe part of that is that when we get an imbalance in the microbiome, we actually can get overgrowth of microbes that create toxins that the body then has to deal with, that go around and create more damage. So the things that I'm actually going to concentrate on here, there are things that we can do that make our gastrointestinal system work most effectively. And one of them I already mentioned, and that's making sure that we actually chew food thoroughly. So how many of you got told by your mothers or grandmothers to chew like 20 times before you swallowed? Did you? Because I got told that when I was growing up. How many of us do that? So if you're having GI problems, and especially as we get older, because the whole digestive system doesn't work quite as well as it did when we were younger for a variety of reasons. But making sure that we chew food thoroughly is very helpful. It's one of the first most helpful things we can do. And the other is to not rush eating. We really need to chew and relax in order for that digestive system to work well. I think that's why when people go visiting Italy, and they take 2 hours over a meal, they often feel a lot better. And then they get back here into this kind of crazy life that we live, and things start to go bad again. Another very common problem is lack of stomach acidity, which is counterintuitive because a lot of people feel that they have gastric reflux, or GERD. And what's really going on is that the sphincter muscle between the stomach and the esophagus gets more floppy or weak as we get older. So the acid that normally would be cut off and kept in the stomach can creep up into the esophagus and cause what we call heartburn. So there's some things we can do to minimize that discomfort. I already talked about bile salt insufficiency, and I'll refer to things we can do to keep our liver more healthy so that we actually produce the right amount of components that help us with digestion. We'll talk briefly about enzyme insufficiency, the most common ones, and then I'll emphasize fiber, which I'm sure you've heard lots about. And I understand that we have 45 minutes, with no questions, but then there'll be a break, and then you'll have lots of time for questions, So I already talked about chewing, but I want to also talk about the importance of adequate saliva. When we chew food, we produce saliva, and that not only helps us, to moisturize the food particles so we can actually swallow them down, but it helps us to secrete enough of the enzymes that begin digestion in the mouth, and then some of those enzymes get turned on further down. But the other thing that's kind of interesting that I don't often think about, and that's this role between saliva and, you could say, maybe heart health, because we actually can convert the nitrites or nitrates that are in some of the leafy green vegetables we eat. We change them to nitrites. They get further changed to nitric oxide, and that helps the blood vessels to relax, and then helps the blood to flow. So there's a lot going on, in just the eating process in terms of affecting many different systems in our body. And it also plays a role in reducing inflammation that we know is related to a lot of chronic disease. So if you kind of move on from the mouth to the stomach, food can stay in the stomach for 2 to 4 hours, sometimes 5. And if you're eating a really light meal that doesn't have much fat or many calories in it, then it's actually probably 2 hours, maybe 3. If it's a high-fat, energy-dense meal, it can be 4 or 5 hours. Chronic stress actually lengthens the time in the stomach, but if it's short-term acute stress, you can actually shorten the time in the stomach because the body's going to try to get everything out of there and be able to get the blood out to where it's needed. So you may have had that experience where you suddenly had to go to the bathroom, when you got really scared or something, bad happened. The stomach acidity, as I mentioned, is really important to make the enzymes that need to work in the stomach work effectively. Especially when we get low stomach acidity, we do not digest the protein that we eat, which is so important to keep our muscles working, properly. And we also don't digest and absorb B12, which can have a lot of neurological implications. And actually, I hope you all are getting tested for B12 levels. I'm kind of surprised that that isn't a routine test that's done as we get older, because having lower stomach acidity is so common. So have a chat with your doctor about that if you aren't having it done. And then to be reminded that the alcohol and water that we ingest gets absorbed directly from the stomach, and that's why, the effect of alcohol is so quick, okay? But the other components in our diet take a bit longer and need to go down further on the train track. So with heartburn, which is so common, especially very common, I'm struck when I go to a drugstore or I go to Costco and see aisles of this stuff that's supposed to help us, not have heartburn. Again, a lot of it relates to this floppy sphincter muscle that happens when we get older, but it's good to realize that there's certain things that we can change that can make it less likely that the sphincter muscle won't work. For example, nicotine from smoking can make it more floppy. Caffeine seems to have the same effect. High-fat meals, acidic food, spicy food, and alcohol all seem to relax the LES sphincter. But the other thing that I recently learned that was sort of a mind blower is the body, if it doesn't have sufficiently acid stomach, it tends not to know to close the LES sphincter. So what's kind of counterintuitive is that we're using antacids to lower stomach acidity so we don't have regurgitation, but we're actually then making the LES sphincter not work so well. So one of the things you're going to hear me implore you is if you're on antacids to try to get off of them. If you're on proton pump inhibitors, you have to do that carefully and with the help of your physician because you need to wean off slowly. But I'm going to tell you some things you can do just from a dietary standpoint that should make it less likely that you're going to have heartburn. Just having a lot of volume of food tends to push up on the LES sphincter, so having smaller meals more frequently often will help. And one of the things that's interesting is that melatonin, which we hear so much about as a sleep aid, and by the way, it's just another one of those bummers about getting older, but we actually don't make as much of it as we get older. So some studies have been done where they've actually used supplemental melatonin, just to see if it will help. And it seems to help a little bit keep the LES sphincter working better. So it's something to explore. And then another thing is that gum chewing, though it's good in the sense of making more saliva, when we chew gum, especially if we have our mouths open, we're swallowing air. And then it hits the stomach and expands, the gas, you could say, expands and pushes up on the LES sphincter. So even though sometimes people say they were going to have a carbonated beverage to kind of settle their stomach, sometimes that has the opposite effect because the bubbles go down there, they get bigger, and they push up. So these are all things to keep in mind. The chronic use of antacids by suppressing stomach acidity makes you more vulnerable to not getting adequate amounts of protein or being able to break the amino acids out of the protein to be able to keep your muscle mass where you'd like it to be. But I think the other things that we worry about is if you don't have that strong acidity, that's kind of like your first barrier, you could say, that kills off infective microbes. So you want strong stomach acidity to be able to kill the bad bugs. The other thing of huge importance to all of us as we get older is when we don't have adequate stomach acidity, we don't absorb alkaline minerals like calcium and magnesium. So we think of calcium as important for our bones. Magnesium is also important for bone health, but it's also really important for the neurological system and also the muscular system. So lots of good reasons to have adequate acid. And then if we don't have adequate acid, we also don't absorb folic acid and B12, and that can cause neurological symptoms. You've heard of C. diff, which is there's this resistant strain now that people get when they're in hospitals sometimes. It's pretty hard to get rid of. And it's much more easy to get infected with that if you don't have strong stomach acidity. So, to keep that in mind. The proton pump inhibitors are just one kind of antacid. There's something also called H2 blockers, which work in a little bit of a different way. And then years ago, people used to just sometimes take like soda, baking soda to kind of neutralize stomach acidity. Any of those things that lower stomach acidity are going to impact digestion, not only in the stomach, but potentially further down. So I think the bottom line is to try to do what you can dietarily to reduce your need for those. The other thing that we've recently gotten news about is that proton pump inhibitors seem to increase the risk from cardiovascular disease and stroke. There's some evidence that they may, contribute to dementia, kidney disease, and fractures. And the fracture connection is probably related to the calcium and magnesium issue. So the clues for low stomach acidity include bloating, belching, burning, and flatulence immediately after meals, or a sense of fullness after you've taken a couple of bites, or that sense that food is just sitting there for a long time. And it is sitting there for a long time because the body knows that it hasn't gotten the appropriate amount of breaking down to send it to the next station. So if you have these symptoms, you can suspect low stomach acidity, and it's something that needs to be looked into, and you need to take some steps to try to change or affect it. The things that we as dietitians recommend to help heartburn or low stomach acid include smaller meals more regularly. So you're not kind of overwhelming the system at any one time. You also aren't having so much volume that it's pushing up on a floppy sphincter. You want to chew your food thoroughly so you have a lot of surface area for the digestion to happen most effectively. You preferably don't want to have a huge portion of protein at one time. So, we always say, especially as we get older, because loss of muscle is so common as we age, that we need a little bit of protein with each meal, okay? But the way we tend to eat is we don't have much protein with breakfast. We often have something carbohydrate and like coffee. And maybe we have a little something at lunch, and then we have a kind of big piece of protein at dinner. So if you are having problems with heartburn, it's better for you to kind of look at your protein intake and kind of, spread it through the day to be more comfortable. Another thing that I think people maybe don't realize, but it can make a difference, is we don't want to be drinking lots of fluid with our meals. because that adds to volume. And the other thing that we tend to do in this country is we drink cold or iced liquids. If you think of yourself going to a restaurant and you're waiting to be served dinner, do you know how many times they'll fill your glass with ice water? And you're drinking like ice water while you're waiting for your meal. And the ice is lowering the temperature in your stomach. And so the enzymes that work best at body temperature are suddenly not working as well. Okay? They don't turn off completely, they just kind of get lazy, you could say. So doing fluids that are at room temperature and sipping them through the day as opposed to huge volumes with meals is generally a great idea. And then remaining upright for at least 60, basically an hour to 2 after a meal, will reduce the potential, for regurgitation or pushing back against that sphincter and getting the acid into the esophagus. And then the studies that have been coming out about melatonin suggest that you can try 3 milligrams of melatonin before bedtime, which is considered protective of the mucosa and helping to tighten the sphincter. And I don't know if any of you go to acupuncture regularly, but acupuncture actually has been shown to be quite helpful at improving digestion. They call it increasing digestive fire, okay? So it's something to look into. So moving on down kind of to the next station, if we think about the small intestine, which is a very large portion of the digestive train track, we do most of our absorption of nutrients in the small intestine. And different things are absorbed at different points along the way. I think the thing that we've come to really appreciate recently is how vulnerable that lining of the gastrointestinal tract is. It's only 1 cell thick. So you've got the outside world moving through you, okay, and the inside world, and there's kind of an interface. The cells are held together. I feel like am I getting a little bit of backup? Is that okay? I'm hearing my sound reverberate. Is it okay?
I cut it back a little.
Okay, I'll just keep going. So one of the things that we've come to appreciate is that certain things are making the tight junctions between the cells open. They need to open periodically because that's how things move in and out. It's kind of the interface between the inside and outside world. But when they're opening too frequently, then, or abnormally, you could say, we're more likely to have undigested food particles, particularly protein, go out into the bloodstream, and then the body sees it as foreign and creates, or attacks it as an invader. And so we end up with these problems, kind of food sensitivities that seem to develop. So one of the things that we've learned, and I think it's in your slide, is you all heard of glyphosate, which is in Roundup? The weed killer that we're all supposed to be, zapping our lawn, bugs or weeds with. That's used increasingly on our staple crops. It's on wheat, it's on corn, it's on soybeans. And what's happening is that it's impacting the gut biome in a way that is causing more immune problems, because partly it may be related to this opening of these junctions. The glyphosate, they always said, was not a problem for humans, but they never explained that a lot of what we call human is actually the outside world. And the microbes are kind of like the weeds, you could say. So the glyphosate actually hurts them. And what happens with glyphosate is now they're actually using it as a drying agent. So before we used to have like a crop of wheat a year, and we just would let crops kind of dry in the field and then harvest them. So now we put glyphosate on the crop so it dries it artificially and they can get more crops per year. But the glyphosate goes up in the clouds, rains down on the ground, gets in the water supply, gets into our food, and that's a problem. So it's worth looking into that, and we need to, I think, be more vigilant about that. The good news is that the gut lining replaces itself every several days, every 5 to 7 days. So even if you've got damage to the lining, you can repair that as long as you have the building blocks to do the repair. If you've already been sensitized and gotten an allergic reaction, you can't oftentimes turn that off, but at least you can stop more of it from happening. I think the other important thing is just that interface between the gut lining and our lymph system, which is our body's drainage system. So when we talk about toxicants or a buildup of toxicants in the body, having a healthy gut and a healthy gut lining is really one important thing we can do to get less toxins or toxic load. So moving on kind of to the last station, the large intestine or colon, its main job in the world is to reabsorb fluids. A lot of the fluids just come from body processes. It's not just the water that we take in or the water that's in the food that we eat. But they do a great job of getting that recycled. It also recycles potassium and sodium. So when we have an operation and we lose part of that absorptive surface, then it puts more burden on the tissue that's remaining. It's also really important in terms of those microbes that actually make some of the bioactive forms of things like vitamin K. We take in vitamin K in its less active form in food, like leafy green vegetables. The gut biome does a transformation and makes it more biologically available. And it's important that we allow all of this to happen in a healthy and happy way to be optimally healthy. When we think about the liver as an ancillary or associated organ, it's good to remember that absolutely everything that we ingest, okay, makes its way through the liver. The liver either does one more step in the digestion process, it might store some of the stuff, or it passes it on to get out of the body. It's a major place that we help to reduce toxic burden, and we want to have a healthy, happy liver to be able to be maximally healthy. It helps us break down hormones, for example, so that we're less likely to have hormone buildup that can lead to some of the hormone-related cancers. It also plays a role in regulating blood sugar, which we always think of as kind of pancreas, but the liver plays a role. So I wanted to share this article that I read a couple of years ago that really got my attention. And you've all heard about fatty liver disease that's happening more in our young people. It used to be just something that people that overused alcohol got fatty infiltration in their liver. And now we know that when people take in too much sugar and high fructose corn syrup, especially our young people, can end up with fatty infiltration in their liver at a quite young age. This article got my attention because they actually showed in the study that a person could get fatty infiltration in the liver in as little as 4 days of eating a really high sugar, high fat diet. And I read this around holiday time, and it really rang a bell because I thought, how many of us end up after the holidays kind of having that sort of heavy feeling, you know, where you just like you're off. And part of my family is French, and so, you know, the French always say, it's your liver. Okay, so in my family, if you didn't feel well, they would just say your liver's out, you know, and you need to eat like more simply and stay away from too much fat. But whenever I think about the temptation over the holidays to have, your friend who makes this fabulous toffee or something, just 4 days of eating like that can really compromise liver function. So it's a good reason to be careful. Might be hard to see here, but a film that I really like to recommend is called That Sugar Film. And this is about a young man. He's a perfectly healthy young man expecting his first child. He's Australian, and he's a filmmaker, and decides that he's going to eat the average amount of sugar that the average Australian eats every day for a number of months. I think it's 2 months. And they do blood work, and they're taping him as he's going around eating what we sometimes think of as pretty healthy food, like smoothies made with lots of fruit, fruit yogurts, that sort of things that we wouldn't normally think of as being horrible foods. And you're watching this guy get a potbelly, at the age of 30, and his blood, his lipids are going up. He's now suddenly like hypertensive. He's got cardiovascular risk. He's pre-diabetic, and it's all from just eating, the amount of sugar that the average Australian eats. So I always recommend that to people because after you see that film, you'll never think of sugar in the same way, okay? It has a powerful impact. But the way that we keep a healthy liver is that we eat plenty of fiber-rich vegetables and fruits. And then when we're choosing fats, we choose the ones that are basically lower on the food chain, okay, like plant fats, avocados, you hear a lot about olive, that sort of thing. And trying to be really good about sugar. Okay, I have a few more minutes. Okay. Okay. So when we're thinking about the colon and about regularity, it's good to think that the average number of bowel movements that a healthy person would or should have is about 1 to 3 per day. When you don't have a bowel movement every day or so, you're going to get this building up of the bile acids, which are going to irritate the lining of the colon. The normal transit time is somewhere between 12 and 24 hours, and the bowels are most active in the morning, and that's why if there's any problem with constipation, we not only look at adequate fiber intake, but we also very strongly recommend warm fluids, like a couple of cups, it could be tea or coffee or hot water with lemon, in the morning to kind of get things going. When we think about fiber, the amount that we need, and this is in your handout, is 25 to 40 grams per day. The average American gets 11 to 15. And that's why we have a lot of problems with regularity. I put this table together. It's just a quick and dirty, but the goal you really want is to have 10 grams of soluble fiber. And if you get enough foods to provide you with that amount of soluble fiber, you'll get the right amount of insoluble fiber. So let me just quickly explain. The soluble fiber is what we call the gelling fibers. They hold onto water and they soften the stool. And the insoluble fiber is kind of rough. You could think of it kind of like a brush. It sort of stimulates peristalsis, so things keep moving through. Of those two, the kind that the friendly bacteria in your gut like as an energy source is soluble fiber. So I have friends who've been trying to increase their fiber intake, and they go rushing out and buy these fiber-enhanced products, like All Bran, that just puts bran in, and bran is insoluble fiber. So it's going to create peristalsis, but it's not going to feed the healthy bugs. And you really want to feed the healthy bugs to keep the intestinal lining healthy and happy. So the other thing, I don't know, do I have my, okay, a couple of things about servings. So you know how you hear for fruit and vegetables that you're supposed to strive for 9 to 12 half-cup servings a day? So if you actually did get, let's just go with 9 and say we're going to do 5 half-cup servings of vegetables and 4 half-cup servings of fruit, that's going to give you 9 grams of soluble fiber, which will be very close to the amount that you need to keep your gut bacteria healthy. If you can then, in addition, have some peas, beans, or lentils, legumes, cooked, you're going to get much more soluble fiber. So, keep that in mind. They've done some work recently to actually show that the push toward whole grains is not as important as getting more fruits and vegetables and legumes in terms of gastrointestinal and other kinds of health. Okay? If you are going to do a whole grain, you need to be aware that the companies that put out bread products can make it very confusing, because they'll say things like made with whole grain, and that tells you absolutely nothing. Okay? It needs to say whole, sprouted, or malted wheat or grain as a first ingredient to actually be primarily a whole grain product. So be wary. The other thing that you'll see in those very small handout slides is that we don't count lettuce as a fiber source because it is such a poor source of fiber. So when I'm talking about 9 half-cup servings of fruits and vegetables, you don't count your lettuce. Okay? You can eat lettuce. That's great. It has some vitamins in it. But it's not going to really be what you need in terms of regularity. And to kind of bring that point home, a half cup of cooked kidney beans that you might have in a chili is going to have as much fiber as 8 cups of lettuce. Did you hear that? Okay. All right. So I want you to think differently about lettuce. If you are going to try to add soluble fiber, you can use ground flaxseed. You could use oat bran. You can use apple or citrus pectin. You could use psyllium seeds. Have any of you used Metamucil, which is ground up psyllium? You kind of stir it into water and it kind of gels. Yeah. So that will tell you that it's a gelling fiber. If you're talking about fruit, if you think about an orange, that white inner peel of the orange has the gelling fiber. So when we're, juicing an orange and throwing away what ends up in the juicer, okay, we're losing all that stuff that our colon really needs. There's a number of fiber supplements that you can try, but honestly, if you could get those fruits and vegetables and legumes in on a regular basis, that's going to do you much more good. If you also continue to have difficulty with constipation, magnesium can be quite helpful. And there's a product called Calm, and if any of you have heard me talk before, I'm a big fan, though I hold no stock in this company. But people over the age of 71, over 70% of us are not getting enough magnesium in our diet. So we need more magnesium-rich foods, but if we aren't getting enough magnesium-rich foods, then taking a supplement like Calm, which is magnesium citrate, is a way to add more. And you can stir this into water and put a splash of some kind of fruit juice in it that's unsweetened, and that will also be helpful. I have a blog on this, and you can go on my website. I also have information on calcium and magnesium in the book. So just quickly, because I know you guys get tired of sitting here. I can kind of go on and on, as you can see, but the big enzyme issues that cause digestive problems, as we get older, a lot of us cannot digest and absorb milk sugar. So, and honestly, the majority of the world's population cannot digest milk sugar after the age of weaning. So it's a very common problem. That's why a lot of people use lactase, the digestive enzyme. Gluten sensitivities are common. They're getting more common, and I think that has to do with how we're GMOing and changing the composition of the grains, partly. And then there's other things that cause difficulty called fructans, and these include inulin. So if any of you have gone out and bought a fiber supplement and really read the small ingredients, you'll see that they very often list this inulin as a fiber source. But a lot of people don't digest it well and it bothers them. There's galactans and polyols, and these are just chemical terms, but the polyols include the alcohol sweeteners that are found in the low-cal section. And so sorbitol falls into that. And I think people that use those low-calorie foods sometimes don't realize that it's an additive in the foods that's causing them the discomfort. So just to be more of aware of labels. Have any of you heard this term FODMAPs? Okay, somebody says, oh yeah. So you can all say this together with me. Fermentable, oligo, di, and monosaccharides and polyols. Okay, that's why we call them FODMAPs. These are short-chain carbohydrates, and they're actually really good for us because the bacteria that are healthy like to eat them. But what happens is if the bacteria that normally reside in the colon start to move up into the small intestine where they do not belong, then they're going to start to digest these up further, which is going to cause gas and bloating kind of up here. Where you get gas production closer to the anus, it can get out without too much difficulty. When it's up here in the middle, it causes a lot of discomfort. So some of the intolerance to these happens because we've messed up some of that early part of digestion that I talked about. The fructans are found in a lot of grains. They're found in garlic and onions. They're found in beans. That's why a lot of people have trouble with beans, but sometimes Beano can help them. And certain foods like cauliflower and mushrooms, and then sorbitol and xylitol, which are not only found in low-cal foods, but are in sometimes dietary supplements. And I think people that have digestive difficulties sometimes need to really read what's on the label to see if it's there. Okay, I'm at the end of time, so I'm just going to quickly call your attention to a couple of things you can read about related to glyphosate and its impact on gut health. And one of them is downloadable from the web. It's called Glyphosate Unsafe on Any Plate. And it actually has 2 pages of tables of commonly eaten food items, including Cheerios, that have actually noticeable amounts of glyphosate residue in them, enough to actually cause GI problems. And we feed that stuff to babies. So we need to get more engaged and find out more about this. The other book that's a little bit going to make you crazy, but it's called The Plant Paradox. It's written by Dr. Grundy, a gastroenterologist who worked at Loma Linda. He's very concerned about lectins, which are in the nightshade family and many other foods. And he has people go on these lectin-free diets, which if people are really having lots and lots of problems and we've tried everything else first, we might go that far. But when you read this book and you read all the foods that you are not supposed to eat, it leaves very little to nourish you, let me just say. So I like to try everything else first. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So quickly, a question that always comes up is about, do I need probiotics or should I take probiotics? And honestly, if you get enough of the soluble fiber, which is a prebiotic that feeds the healthy guys, you probably don't need probiotics. But on the other hand, if you've had a course of antibiotics, or you've had chemotherapy where you've had some of your healthy gut bacteria knocked out, then repopulating can be helpful. So I put down just some things that you need to think about before choosing a probiotic. I think your very best source to get unbiased information is from a group called consumerlab.com. It's non-commercial. It doesn't take any advertising money, and you actually have to pay, kind of like you do for Consumer Reports. But at least you're getting the straight scoop. And they actually go in and they actually analyze supplements to find out if what they say they have on the label is actually in the pill. But the other things to look for include strain, number, and diversity. There's a number of probiotics on the market that just have like one type of bacteria in it. It's really better to have many different strains to kind of repopulate with the most diversity possible. You also need to know the daily dose and the batch numbers. So I just gave you a few for you to compare. Huge numbers of differences, not only in strain number, but in daily dose. The one that seems to have the most published research is VSL3. It's also the most expensive. So you may not need to use that, but you'll find that a lot of these others have testimonials on the web, but they don't have anything published to show their benefits. So it's a little problematic. I'm a big proponent of soluble fiber to make sure that you're having a healthy gut biome. This is a great book for anybody that wants to read further called Digestive Wellness. Liz Lipsky is a wonderful, wonderful nutritionist in the Maryland area, and it's very worth reading. And I'll just end by saying the way you can support digestive wellness is to make sure you're getting a fiber-rich diet, like we talked about, preferably organic, to reduce glyphosates and other contaminants. We want to have less processed food, especially high-fat and fried food, because that's the hardest to digest. If you coat carbohydrate with fat and fry it, that really is a problem for your body. Adequate fluids, mostly between meals, really help. Regular meals with moderate volume. Taking the time to chew and enjoy your food. And by the way, just smelling food being prepared, actually you start to secrete digestive enzymes, which can be very helpful. We want to avoid foods that cause GI distress and allergy, minimize our exposure to antibiotics and antacids, and really look into glyphosate and learn more about it, because I think it is an issue. As a dietitian, I've been in this business for, 50 years, more or less, and I've just never seen so many problems with GI, so many issues with GI as I have recently. So I really think the way we're eating is having a huge, not so great impact on our gut, okay? So thank you very much, and you need to get up and walk around now, okay?
Thank you, Vic.